Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we have to talk about tracking cookies because the death of tracking cookies doesn't mean the death of ad targeting, and I found this to be absolutely interesting. This is coming from Reuters, although there's a couple of different places reporting on this lately, and here's what's going on. Next year, Google plans to phase out technology in the Chrome browser that lets other companies track users via cookies. Now, that doesn't mean that you will see irrelevant ads or that essentially, if you're looking at this, something like a pair of shoes that you've been looking at online will stop following you around the web. And basically, here's why. Now, before we get into that, cookies, if you didn't know, are one of the foundations of the web, allowing you basically to visit something like a news publisher without entering login credentials each time, because the website basically knows every time you're visiting it, what you're doing, your free article count, and on and on and on. But privacy advocates have been saying for years that companies that develop online ad technology have been abusing cookies by tracking users across many websites and letting brands use the data to target ads. Apple's Safari, Mozilla's Firefox, and Brave, the web browser Brave, have been on the forefront of restricting tracking cookies and all of that. I use Brave. I see it as it strips the cookies down. And now Google's Chrome, which is essentially the largest web browser on the planet with about 60% of the entire market share of browsers, is going to start doing that as well. Now, for years, online ad retail companies, or online ad technology companies, I should say, including Google, could tell, for example, a shoe retailer to personalize an ad that is, when you're going to a website that has nothing to do with shoes, like Reuters.com or the New York Times or somewhere else, because they will have tracked you through your cookies, understanding that you went to a shoe manufacturer's website looking at shoes, or you went to a retail outlet looking at specific colors of shoes or models, and all of that then gets integrated into very specific targeting. So when you are going to either Facebook or New York Times or wherever you're reading, you are starting to see the ad for that specific color, that specific model, that specific anything. And this goes for everything. Cars, everything else. If I look up a car online, the ads will get very specific. If I look up a Mercedes, I'm going to get ads for Mercedes. If I look up a Ford, I'm going to get ads for Ford. That's essentially how this works. But under these new policies, tracking like this across multiple websites is unfeasible. But Google appears to have found some kind of workaround to that, even though they may not be using cookies, because Google is testing a way for businesses to target ads to clusters or groups of consumers that have similar interests, which is to say, basically, it would be more private because the individual is essentially one of many that is targeted. So the group may know, oh, well, Nick's into cars, or Nick's into shoes, or Nick's into whatever, but because I'm one of, let's say, 1 million people that are into that, I then just get grouped with those people. Now, the technology is part of a project that Google is calling their Privacy Sandbox, and it would use an algorithm to group people according to their common web browsing. Each group would have a minimum membership so users couldn't be identified. In other words, if I have, let's say, some very specific or unusual thing that I am continuously browsing for, Google would not be able to create a group of one, and therefore I would be identified for that very specific, let's say, websites that I go to, or unique combination of things, in the same way that a cookie could. Now, brands could target their ads to this group or this cluster interested in, let's say, buying a car, rather than relying on cookies that have tracked you to a specific car buying website and seeing what kind of cars you're searching on. Now, big trade groups representing advertisers have called on Google to actually delay phasing out cookies until an alternative proves suitable. Google said this past January that its tests show that the clustering system could actually be effective. Now, this all sounds great, and it sounds more anonymous than obviously individual cookies to cluster or group people together, but could this be a way for Google to actually become more powerful within targeted advertising? And the reason being is that the UK's Competition and Markets Authority this past January began investigating whether restricting cookies in Chrome will actually help Google increase its dominance in the online ad industry. Critics contend Google is banning rivals from building gigantic profiles on users while developing for itself features in Chrome that continue to add to their own dossiers. Now, Google, in a blog post this past Wednesday, actually disputed that notion. The company vowed it would not develop workarounds for itself and committed to continuing to allow targeted ads based on data that companies receive directly from consumers. And yeah, right, they're not going to find a workaround to their own product. Come on now. I don't really believe that, to be perfectly honest. That's obviously my speculation and opinion. But there are other possible cookie-free options out there for advertisers. One of the other systems proposed by a rival to Google is from Trade Desk Inc. that relies on encrypted copies of email addresses that people use to log into websites. So for example, the Washington Post said this past December that it would start adopting Trade Desk Tools utility for this, and it's called Unified ID 2.0. It is also possible that showing someone ads based on activities they undertook on another website will grow unpopular. But before cookies essentially led to advances in targeting, ads more commonly were related to surrounding content. So for example, a video about vaccines, which we've all seen videos on vaccines the last few months, would feature ads from medical fields, but not specifically about vaccines themselves. And I think that this is absolutely interesting. I've been having my cookies, my tracking cookies stripped due to Brave, for probably over a year now, and it's been really interesting to see what that's done to the ads. Some ad websites, depending on where I go, seem to be really interested in what I'm doing and will actually show me ads, but a lot of my ads have been vastly reduced. So for example, let's say I'm shopping for that Mercedes or that Ford, or, take your car pick brand. I may be seeing stuff about cars, let's say in advertisement, but I'm not being inundated in the same way that, if you go to a cars.com and you click on one car because you're interested in buying it, now that car starts showing up at every flippin' website that you go to. Same if you go to Nike.com or Reebok.com, look for those Air Jordans, and now suddenly you're going to have ads for nothing but Air Jordans and the color of your choice. I'm assuming they come in multiple colors. So I think this is very interesting. I think this is a win for privacy, but if Google is able to essentially dictate the next generation of what cookies is, I think that's going to be a bit of a problem, in the sense that we are essentially taking them at their word. They're on their honor system here, that they are not actually going to find a workaround to that cluster to start individually targeting. And when you combine that to the hundreds of millions of people, if not billions, that have things like Gmail accounts or have to log into Android phones with their actual Gmail account and then fire up Chrome and start browsing, there are going to be many different indicators outside of cookies that Google will be allowed, or basically not allowed, but actually technically by permission, they will be allowed to see in Android and other browsers. So I think this is going to be a very interesting thing. As we develop this, it's going to be very interesting to see if you're just going to get trivial, random, non-relevant ads to you, because they can't track you at all, or if we're going to actually see some way around that keeps you anonymous, but still gives you ads that are relevant to your life. Some people don't want to see these ads left or right. Some people are like, I want targeted ads because it's relevant to my life. Me, I'm thinking to myself, I really don't want to see any ads whatsoever on any platform, because 9 times out of 10, if your ad is interrupting what I'm doing, I am much less inclined to buy what you're selling. And obviously there are things that we do need to buy, eventually a car if you're not in an urban area with a subway, eventually clothes and on and on and on and on and on. But I would rather go find those myself, through my own searching, ideally anonymous. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that. That is your news of the day. But cookies look like they're going away, and what replaces them may be more anonymous, but it may give Google more control, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. And please share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, and please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, guys.